Hey, we have painter Molly Wright. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for coming on tonight.
You're welcome. Thanks for asking me.
It's an absolute pleasure. I'm Kevin.
And I'm your co-host, Brian.
So yeah, Molly, I took a look at your artwork and there's some pretty amazing stuff. I see you kind of have this impressionistic, like abstract mixed with realism. That's kind of like your style. Can you tell us a little bit
Yeah.
about your artwork and how did you even get into art in the first place?
Well, I think my MO right now is, and it's been for a while, is that my tagline is that I enjoy writing the line between abstract and realism, and so that you picked up on that, obviously. But I started. I didn't go. I went to liberal arts college, but I majored in art, um,
Okay.
and I had a minor in art history, and I specifically was doing painting. Um, I never thought I could make a career out of that at that point. You know, this was in the 80s and, before social media, obviously, and all that. So I did other things. I actually started my own catering business out of college,
Oh,
which obviously is creative, but not in the same vein. And I didn't paint for probably 10 years after I finished school. And then when my children were little, I started painting again, but I still never really thought of it as a career. And then probably, I'm going to say 20 years ago, I was painting enough and decided, well, that I would try doing a little show out of my house. And that show
right.
the show did really well. So I was like, maybe I can, make a little money on the side doing this. So it kind of started like that. And I had years where I was like not focusing on it at all, depending on what was happening family wise. Um, and then, but I always kind of went back to it. And then I started getting into, I had some galleries reach out. So I kind of tucked some things here and there with that. And then eventually I was to the point in my life where my marriage was not in a great place. And I was looking at things like, I'm going to have to do something, when this falls apart.
Right.
So
Right.
I decided to see what I could do and just put everything I had into it as far as my emotional and, my time and everything else.
Kind of just put all the eggs in one basket.
Yeah, exactly. And said, if I'm going to do it, I have to commit to it. And so I did, and it went well. At that point, I was starting to get into more galleries and things, but I really, and this was before COVID. Um, I really was kind of like throwing stuff on the wall and just seeing what stuck. I was reaching out to shows, to galleries, to everything I could to show my work. So I got into more galleries and did some shows, and I was doing some commissions, and I was kind of I was in social media. My niece went to Savannah College of Art and Design, and she got me into social media originally, which was early on, um, especially Instagram, which of course is great for artists.
Oh
So
yeah.
yeah, so um, I just kept pushing at things, and it started to take off, and I started doing really well, and then and making a name for myself. At that point, I was living in Charlotte, North Carolina, had moved there, and um, was making some connections, and then
It's a very pretty area.
yeah, it is, and I really like it there. So I ended up. COVID hit, and of course, everybody's thinking what's going to happen to everybody's business and everybody's, everything else.
Yeah.
And my assumption was everybody's going to just hide, and that was it. Well, it turns out to be an incredible boom for the art world. Everybody's redoing their house, everybody's buying, and it just took off. I mean, like crazy.
Wow.
So Yeah, I was selling at that point. I was selling small paintings. Just like every 2 weeks, I would do a group of like 15 or 20 little paintings, and they were just going like this. And that
Wow.
continued all the way through COVID to the end of COVID. And then when Instagram changed their algorithm, um, that really was the combination of that and the very end of COVID changed things up. And people were not able to do that as successfully as before. So then you pivot and try to figure out how else to work with it, which is kind of where I am now, what I've been doing, and still succeeding, but now to the point where I am announced about a few months ago that I'm pulling all my work out of my galleries. So actually, I'm leaving the work in there, but I'm not sending any new work to galleries because I'm successful enough on my own to not need that anymore.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's incredible. I never.
That's a real blessing.
Yeah. If anybody ever told me that I would end up where I am, I wouldn't have believed it, but it is possible, and I have 7 grandchildren, and the majority of them are creative, and a couple of them really want to be a professional artist. And I tell them, you can do it, it is possible.
Yeah.
And there are different ways to do it, but it is a possibility. That wasn't, when I was a child, that was a pie in the sky dream. So I feel, I'm very, very happy and thankful that I'm where I am with my career.
So you mentioned something pretty interesting about the Instagram algorithm changing. What did you notice that it changed to?
Well, it was organic, it was real time, and we were seeing, you would post, the people that you followed, the people that followed you would see that, and then they changed it up. So, the time, some people see the post that you put there, some people don't see that for a week.
Oh, wow.
Some people see it, right away. Some people see it hours later. And if you're not at the top of their list, depending on how many comments you've gotten, and I'm not doing a great job of explaining it because I'm not a techie, but anyway, so that there is no way to systemize, what you're doing as far as making sure everybody sees things. So it's definitely different.
That's unfortunate.
It is. Well, I always tell people a few things. Instagram, it's a business. And if you're running the business, you would run the business to make money and to be
Right.
successful. The second thing is it's free. And we have no right to complain about things that are free, so it doesn't work the way we want, sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
But anyway, so, you just try to keep working with it if you want to use it, It's like anybody that complains about social media to me, I'm like, well, don't use it. Nobody's forcing you to use it,
Yeah.
And if you feel the need to use it, you got to work with it. This is just the way it is, So
like, was your initial growth strategy, was that like completely organic, or was there anything that you did in particular to cultivate your audience?
that was completely organic. I'm trying to think, trying to kind of remember how it went. But I think it was really kind of like I was posting regularly. You don't want to post too much. You don't want to post too little. So I think
you want to like find that sweet spot.
Yeah, if there even really is one. There is, but, so I was just trying different things, really that was the main focus, was just, I'm just going to keep trying. And then things just started working. I think to answer your question, yes, it was posting regularly to my audience that I knew was there, and adding, as I went, a lot of hashtagging, trying to see what was working with that. And hashtags were more effective then than they are now. So, just trying to work with it. And people, constantly trying to figure it out. I've never tried to figure out the algorithm. They're changing it all the time.
Yeah.
I just feel my way along, and I'm like, okay, I'm now to the point where I'm doing releases, two big piece releases a year, and then usually a small one and maybe a print drop, limited time print drop. When I do those, I plan that I'm going to post a certain number, like a marketing strategy. I have a marketing person, but I have to work with them, and we kind of bounce things off each other. But basically and I do boost, for my releases. I boost. Normally I don't. The boosting for me has been extremely successful. So, but you can't spend $15, you've got to spend some money and make, it's.
Yeah, we've had pretty good results with boosting on YouTube to really
Yeah, I haven't done anything with YouTube.
to really increase the subscribers. I'm a drum teacher, so I've used Instagram ads for, drum lesson ads, things like that.
Does that work?
Well, yes and no. I find it to be highly competitive. So, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
There's a lot of, well, and then also I think what kind of gets me is that I don't teach online because I teach feel. So like if I'm showing a kid Billie Jean from Michael Jackson, I'll be on the side of the drum set playing the quarter note along with the song so they can get the feel of, oh, this is where the song is. This is where the drummer should be focusing. You can't really do that through
you're
through
right.
a screen. Oh, well, I don't know. At least I don't know how you would do it through a screen. So I think, in terms of being competitive, I'm not as competitive because I just teach in person. There's a lot of people that do teach online, so I think they probably beat me out in some ways. But but no, the YouTube for the podcast, the YouTube boosting has been going very well.
Okay, good to know. Yeah, I haven't done anything with YouTube, so I'm glad to kind of, you've kind of given me a little idea in my mind. So, yeah.
I think we're in the era of pay to win now. Like before the algorithm, it used to promote you or quote unquote organically. You could get a big audience just by being consistent. Now, if you don't pay, it's like your stuff is a ghost.
They just don't show it. Yeah, they just don't show it.
Yep, that's pretty much it. Unless you have something, you get backed by somebody big, or there's something that like that hits you. Then you can obviously jump. But yeah, I mean, I was lucky enough the majority of my jumping happened before the algorithm and the boost. I wasn't boosting back then. I don't think. I may have been starting, but anyway, so now, it's harder to do that without paying, for sure. Yeah.
Exactly. So I noticed like you primarily sell originals versus prints. Was there any reason for more so the focus on selling originals?
Yeah, I've been back and forth and around about it. I actually am licensed by a print company, and they sell to like Crate and Barrel, Pottery Barn, and so my work is, and I'm still licensed with them, some of my older work, so that stuff's still showing up. I'm to the point when and they just reached out to me and asked me for new work, and I said no, not because I'm backing away from galleries. I'm kind of doing the same thing with the prints, and originals are more valuable, obviously, and prints do give people who can't afford my work an opportunity to own at least, the image of that. So
yeah,
I'm always a little torn about it. But now what I'm doing is just doing like I said, like usually once a year, a limited release of a limited number of prints for people. And that's been very successful. So, you know, and I pick and choose. I do have people constantly messaging me like, will you do this in a print? Will you do that in a print?
Yeah, I network a lot on LinkedIn and more recently Instagram. And I have been noticing that exactly what you're talking about. Like they'll say, okay, limited drop from this date to this date.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been seeing that more and more. I think that's becoming more and more popular. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's, you know, definitely, it definitely gives, you know, gives more of the sense of urgency. You know, and it's also a limited number for the same reason, you know, if people know they only have a certain amount of time to get it, you know,
they're going to jump on it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. So, that's been somewhat effective, but anyway, to answer your question, Kevin, back and forth about the print thing, you know, I have mixed feelings about it. So, but you know, I do think I prefer the originals, you know. You just can't get the same. It's like showing, even showing artwork in photographs. I don't care how good the photograph is, period, or, you know, showing it. It's like posting on Instagram. My work is, and everybody that buys my work, almost always I get at least one person saying, it's so much different, you know, so much better in person. And I'm like, well, you just can't, you know, you can't make that happen on it with a camera. You know, the camera's limited. We all know that, no matter how good they are. So,
yeah, it's limited.
Yeah.
I think there's just something special about having something that, you know, came directly from the hand of the artist and nobody else has versus, you know, like one of 2,000 copies, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And that kind of brings me to something else, that the fact that art is more of a relationship situation than you think. And people want to know, they like to know the artist. They like to say they've met the artist, or they like to say they've had contact with the artist. They like the feeling of that. They like a story behind you know, what they've got, or, you know, if not how you created it or why you you know, anything like that. That's why people love seeing people, you know, producing, because they want to see the real, you know, what made it, you know, the story behind it. And it took me a long time to really kind of figure that out. I've always been a quiet, private person, and I wasn't comfortable with that. But I've kind of grown into it to recognize that people like a relationship, you know.
Well, and then you have, of course, people like Bob Ross.
Yeah, I mean, I guess he, you know, yeah, he does have an amazing story.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. He was interesting, an interesting. I don't know how you'd put it, but, you know, that was obviously before the internet and
before the internet.
Yeah, think about what he was doing. That, you know, that was really actually pretty advanced, you know.
Yeah, I remember watching it just as a kid, you know, 3-4 years old, see him on TV drawing away, and here's a little bunny,
mesmerizing.
Here's a little bush and a waterfall. Here's a tree.
And he had such a soothing voice, you know. He had that.
Yeah, I think he was like somebody who really leaned into branding before a lot of people knew what that was. He was kind of like the internet before the internet.
Yeah.
His look was so unique that
well, and the fact that we enjoyed seeing the process. You know, that was the biggest thing. So for sure, you know, he was ahead of his time.
Have you
now there are lots of jokes, but it's true.
Have you tried any like live streaming sessions where you kind of work on the painting live?
No, trying to think if I've done that. No, I have done some. I've done some like, you know, in gallery demonstrations, or, you know, had people gone to a party or whatever and painted, you know, that kind of thing. But not an intentional like live stream of that. I did some workshops, and that was like right before COVID, and those were very successful. I still have people asking me about it, but and I enjoyed teaching more than I thought I would. But I haven't done. It's trying to think about that. Trying to set it up and do all that, and I'm like, it kind of takes some away from the creating. To me, to create in front of something, on purpose is not always an easy thing for me to do.
Well, and I think teaching, I just know this from music, teaching is very, very different than performing.
For sure.
So as you're talking about, you just in a room working on something, that's going to be one way. And then, there's the total opposite side of the spectrum. So
yeah. So, but I have thought about that.
There was this term, starving artists, and me before I got to programming, I was really into art and kind of wanted to do the whole thing, but obviously, not everybody can make it as an artist. But I think now with technology, it's a lot. I'm not going to say easier, but there's a lot more opportunities since you can find your audience like almost immediately. But with the advent of turning art into a business, do you find like that takes away some of the passion? Like, are you forced to make more of this kind of painting because that's what the audience is responding to?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And to me, it's kind of twofold. I actually enjoy the business side of what I do. I didn't expect to, but I really do. And I think part of it is I'm a very organized person. I like that sense of being organized. So there's the steps of doing everything. But it also gives me a break. My brain, when I'm working on a painting is very different than the way I'm using my brain when I'm working on the business side. So it's kind of nice to have that, that back and forth like that. The other part of it, as you were saying, is painting for the business, this is a constant struggle for me. And I know for a lot of artists.
Right.
Am I painting my truth, and I'm constantly, I struggle with it, but at the same time, it's like, the more you struggle with it, the further it moves away. You have to just accept the fact that this is where you are, but it's hard, especially if you're successful and you're successful with things a certain way, you think, and so a lot of it, early on, I was painting almost everything for people, almost everything, like, and I don't mean commissions, but I'm just saying like, oh, that sold, I've sold this painting, I've redone this painting 5 times for somebody, for different people, because the original went and they were
like that style. So you
redo this,
kept going in the same vein.
Yeah. And or literally, I do copy my own work a lot. Most of my commissions are copying my own work. Somebody saw a painting and they're like, somebody else bought it before I could get it, and then I'm like, can you redo it? And I said, it will not be exactly the same. Every painting's different, but I can give you the same feel and the same palette. It'll be similar. And I don't think I've ever had somebody say, well, then I don't want to do that.
I'm sure people appreciate that.
Yeah, I think so. They want the person, the energy in the painting that,
Yeah, like we're talking about before, print versus the original artwork, it's a very different experience, just
exactly
putting the painting in your home or your bedroom and just really looking at it and realizing, oh, this is creating something. This is creating a mood. This is creating certain feelings in me, where I've noticed, there's some print artwork that is quite beautiful, but there is something that's missing from it, like you're saying. Yeah.
I mean, I have an excellent photographer who does, and he does the prints, And it is, you would think they were paintings, but there is something missing, you know. It's not the same. So
like, where do you feel like the stories come from, your art? Like, before you start painting, like, where does the idea come from? Or is it just kind of like, cool
yeah, you
picture
mean like,
flashes in your head and you're gonna paint it?
yeah,
Yeah, like,
so inspiration.
yes,
Yeah,
inspiration.
yeah. Um, well, it comes from all kinds of places, you know, which I think every artist, and I mean musician, artists, any writer, whatever, feels that way. It's kind of like there's no one thing. And it can be random things, you know. But I actually was listening to a conversation the end of the week with Jack Antonoff, who, you know, is a writer and producer. He works with a lot of big names, and he was talking about the same type of thing, inspiration and creativity. And he said the blessing and the curse of it is that you can't control it. It comes and it goes. And
Yeah.
and he said, you know, that's great, but it's also frustrating as hell at times. You
Yeah,
know?
I can speak to that a little bit.
Yeah.
Kind of as a side project, I compose video game music.
Oh.
And, you know, I used to be able to stay up all night writing a piece. You know, I'd be up until 4 or 5 in the morning, just
Mm-hmm.
rapidly, you know, manically just creating this artwork. But now I haven't written anything in, I don't know, 7 or 8 years.
Wow.
So I have a lot of material released. I have a whole full length of material to release still to get mastered. But I don't write anymore. I don't know where the creativity went, but
Oh,
it's
interesting.
like if I try to sit down and write now, it feels
Yeah.
like work, and I just come up with stuff that I hate.
Yeah.
So it's strange, but like you're saying,
Very.
it comes and
Yeah.
goes, comes and
Yeah.
goes. Maybe it comes back one day. You know, I don't know. I'm not going
Yeah.
to throw out my equipment, but yeah, for the time being, I think my creativity is more leaned into the actual podcast
Right.
than music per se. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you know, when you think about it, that's kind of, life is, everything ebbs and flows in life. So why wouldn't this be any different? You know, like, you know, the inspiration. But so Kevin, to answer your question a little better, inspiration comes from all kinds of places, and I think that when I don't have it, I work anyway. I just keep working, you know, and and sometimes it's there and sometimes it's not. And sometimes I can do a painting and put it away for a year because it doesn't feel right, and come back and just, you know, and it paints itself, you know. Um, so, but so I don't wait for inspiration, you know. But I also think I pick things up all the time from different places, and not even knowing it. And what I was going to say about the Jack Antonoff conversation also is that was incredibly inspiring. And I can't remember what the whole conversation was now, but he was talking about his work and his process. And um, I was just so blown away, inspired by it. And I actually watched Taylor Swift's Long Pond sessions, where it was during COVID, and she was writing folklore. And Jack Antonoff's actually in that because he wrote those songs with her and another songwriter. But you see her whole process, and she's actually writing the songs and figuring all that out on while we watch what happens. I was blown away, you know, and that is really inspiring to me, those things. But it can also be nature, you know, being out and seeing. I can see things when I'm driving, you know, that I'm like, oh, I want to, you know, do that. So, and
Yeah.
other people's work can be very inspiring. Music can be, for sure. So
It
really,
makes me think about Michael Jackson. And I remember, I don't know how many years ago, it might have been like 20 years ago. So I guess he was probably still alive. someone put out a recording of Michael basically recording over himself, just vocal tracks, but he would do the bass line. He would do the piano part. He would do the backup vocal. He'd do the lead vocal, and he would just copy it all, on top of itself.
Yeah.
Because the thing was, he didn't actually play any one instrument,
Mm-hmm.
but he wrote a big bulk of his music with that kind of. So when I heard that, I said, wow, this guy is super creative. He doesn't play piano, but he's there and like, he's somehow able to like get it all out, and then have the session musicians say, oh, okay, I know what you're doing, Michael. Is it like this? Dun, 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 dun. Like, oh yeah. So
see, that's inspiring too, isn't it?
Yes.
That creative process and finding out how people do things. It's like
everyone has their own process, right? Everyone is a little different with, art, like physical art, like painting or music. Everyone's sort of, or kind of like you're saying, like every painting is a little bit different. Even if you have a print or you have a painting and someone says, hey, I really love this. Would you be able to, do you have another copy, or can you recreate that?
Right.
I think that's really powerful to be able to sit there and say, you know what, this was good, but I'm going to make something just as good in the moment right now, because I'm feeling inspired. And if you're not feeling inspired, it's probably more like work and harder to do. But I'm sure you can still do it either way, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah. And this is actually the timing of this is interesting because I'm talking about this. I had somebody reach out to me recently about doing a portrait of their dog for her husband, and a larger, it was 36 by 36. So we're not talking a little, piece. And I used to do a lot of dog portraits. I just kind of happened into it. And then I stopped pretty much doing animals altogether. But so when she reached out to me, I said, no, I'm not doing that anymore, but, thank you, whatever. And then she actually didn't get my message. And she came back and she said, I haven't heard from you. And she said, this is kind of what I'm looking for. And she described how she wanted it done. And I started to think about it. I'm like, I think I want to do that. I think that her idea, worked with my work. And I was like, I think I want to do that. So I was inspired enough to say, I would like to do that piece. I did it. I loved it. She's thrilled with it, the whole thing. But the sense of wanting to do it, being inspired, had to be there. Otherwise, I could do the painting for her, but I wouldn't want to. And it would probably be fine, but it would be missing something, I would bet.
There's something, yeah, it's almost like a baker or a chef. If they're adding, like they say, they add the extra ingredient is love. They love what they're doing. So because of that, it ends up coming out a lot better. I mean, I know if I'm making chicken wings for myself and I'm excited about making them, they come out better than if I'm just, oh, okay, let me put the butter and now let's put the sauce. It's a different, there's an energy there.
Yeah, definitely. So there's,
So, I mean, it's your business, but how do you keep work from just turning into work to where like, I got to do this. I'm gonna just punch it in. I got to make this money.
Time away from it. That's really the big thing, like anything else. And I have as I said, I've got 7 grandchildren. I've got 3 adult children with siblings, and they live in different places, and I go there and see them, or they come see me, and I really tried very hard not to work when they're here, unless it's like, well, take somebody into my studio to show them something, or the little kids want to do something, but I'm not actually working then. But anyway, it's and then I can come back and feel fresh from it. Definitely, anything to completely change what I'm doing. If I'm struggling when I'm working with feeling you're talking about, I will walk away, go outside and literally walk for an hour or whatever to change it up and come back and see if it's better. And it almost always is better after that.
It's funny. I heard one time, I forget the guy's name. He was a screenwriter in Hollywood, and he was being interviewed, and the person said, you know, what do you do when you hit a roadblock, you know, writer's block, whatever, when you just come, you know, you hit a wall, you can't go any further. He said, well, you know, funny enough, I take seven to 8 showers a day, because he said there's something about when he's in the shower, the water's coming down, his mind just kind of trailing off.
Yeah.
He said in those moments, ideas are sparked, creativity is sparked. So I found that really interesting. Is, you know, we all have kind of like inventors, you know, Thomas Edison. He'd say, well, you know, I haven't failed 10,000 times. I've just, you know, found 10,000 reasons that this light bulb doesn't work. So I'm going to keep going.
Yeah. It's like everything's a problem to solve, not a problem that's a problem. You know, it's like a puzzle to solve. So, yeah. And, you know, the shower thing and the walking away thing, and that is literally a physiological, your brain literally changes by doing those things. So, and that enables space for the inspiration, you know. So that is a biological truth. So,
that's interesting.
Yeah.
So I went on your website and I noticed like how you price your paintings. Like you really value your work. You're confident in your abilities and your ability to sell. And I know like a lot of times when people are just getting started as artists, they're probably gonna, you know, underprice their work. They're gonna sell something that they could have sold for, like, let's just say 2,000. They'll sell it for 200 because they don't really think that people are gonna pay that price. How did you get to that point where you really knew your worth and what, you know, and you could charge the prices that you charge?
It's been a long time, a long trip. You know, I started out that way too, you know, and as you go along, you learn and you gain confidence, because the more that sells, the more confident you become, you know, and then you have, you know, a show that sells completely out and you feel more confident to inch the pricing up, you know. People, there are so many people in this era right now. There are so many people with a lot of money who will buy art. There's always somebody. I could sell my paintings for 3 times as much if I were confident enough to price it that way. People would buy it. It has to do with the confidence of the price, you know, the person who's pricing. I'm confident with where my pricing is because I've worked up to this point. And I actually just raised my prices this year. I went 3 years, I think it was 2 or 3 years without raising them. I don't raise them a lot. I raise them a little, but, and even that is not always comfortable, but it's necessary. But when I started out, I was giving art away. I was selling it very cheap. I was selling, you know, if somebody, you know, just trying to do anything to make a sale. And that's good, but it's also, you know, good and bad for your self-confidence, you know, and for your work. But if you're starting and people don't know who you are, you know, the more you can spread yourself, your name out there, the better, you know.
Absolutely.
So there is a piece of that, but it's really just it's been a gradual process. I did not, and I was never I was never confident as a person, as a child, or it took me a long time to gain where I am now to where I am now.
But yeah, like you're talking about gaining traction, kind of getting momentum and different things. It brings me back to when I was 22 years old, moved out to LA with an indie rock band. We only lasted about 10 months, but you know, I was the one pushing everything forward. I was the one booking the gigs. And then I'd book a gig, and then the band members would be complaining like, "Oh yeah, I don't really want to play at that bar," or like, "Oh, that's too far," or "That's not like a trendy place." And I'm like, "Look, we might have been bigger fish, in Connecticut growing up, but
Yeah.
now we're in, this is the big time, LA.
Yeah.
We're a tiny little baby fish now. We have to take every opportunity, like you're saying, just running around, doing this, doing stuff for
Yeah.
free.
Do everything
I
you can.
knew that was part of it. And the other band members, for whatever reason, I mean, it's tough with bands. A lot of bands don't work out because it's a people business. You're dealing with people. People are unpredictable.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I like what you said about that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's yeah. It takes time for sure. But yeah, it's, throw everything you can at the wall and see what sticks. Just, So, a lot of rejection, pain of, comparing yourself to other people and, years. I am so much better about that than I was, but that's been a long, long road, So it's just growth, really.
Yeah. When I first started teaching drums, I kind of had that imposter syndrome thinking, oh, I was 18. So I'm like, oh, I'm too young. People are, the student's going to know more than I'm going to know.
Yeah.
And it never happened.
Yeah.
So like a drum teacher I had at the time, he was teaching at this one place in Westport, Connecticut. And he was only doing sessions where he wasn't doing any house calls. And he had a student that was switching over to, he needed someone to come to the house.
Mm-hmm.
So the drum teacher of mine, he said, hey, let me give you this lesson. Take this kid and just teach him, do hour lessons in his home. You could charge him, whatever the price was. And I was very timid about it. I'm like, yeah, I don't know. I'm only 18. I don't know if I can do this, but he had the confidence that I could do it. So I went, and sure enough, it was easy. It was simple because as long as you're that one step ahead of the student, you're fine. If you're directly on their level, okay, they might be able to tell, okay, this guy doesn't really know what he's doing. But if you're just one step ahead, I found in my teaching career that's enough. That's and you'll get more, like we're talking about confidence. Each time I taught, I became more and more confident as I went. And now I'm at the point where I'm extremely confident. I know I can pretty much do anything I set my mind to. And it's just that the mind is a very powerful tool. Let's say that.
Yeah. Did you raise your prices as you went?
Yes, I have. I started off probably at $40 an hour, then bumped it up to 50, then 60. When I moved to LA, I was charging 60 to 80. Now I'm charging 80 to 100. I'm in Long Island, New York now. Where are you living right now?
I'm in Pawleys Island, South Carolina.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah, so at the beach, which is really nice. Yeah, so a lot of
sounds beautiful.
It is. I get to be outside a lot, which I love. So yeah, it's nice. So where are you, Kevin?
I'm in Frisco, Texas, so kind of in the center of the map.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah.
So you mentioned a pretty interesting point about like not comparing yourself against others. And, in my time as an artist, I think that was one of the things that kind of drove me off the path. I would look at the master artist and look at my work and see all of these flaws. And then it stopped becoming fun because I'm bashing my work in my head so much that I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah.
Like, how did you avoid that and keep going?
I think I felt like I had to, no matter what, I had to keep going.
And not everyone has that, not everyone has that go get them mentality of I'm going to do whatever it takes.
Well, it's like, you got to pay the bills. So you do that, and, but yeah, I think I used to compare myself a lot, to other people. I've learned that a few things, and part of what you said made me think that our art is all unique to us. There is really no way to compare unless you're trying to, even if you copy someone else's, it's still going to be your work because you're not them, and you can't put yourself in their, their work. So I think really understanding that helped me. And I also think I've learned that there are different ways of learning and different ways of doing art and different ways of experiencing things, and that it's okay to not be just like everybody else, and to have gone to have your MFA. Does that make you a good artist to have an MFA? I used to think it did. I don't think so anymore. I think what makes art good is what it makes people feel. And people buy art. They either buy it because they want it to match their sofa, which is okay, doesn't matter to me. But people who love art love the feeling it gives them. And that is unique to you. It's what you make people feel is unique to you. And that, for me, is why I paint. The piece of me that's coming out on the canvas, which I intentionally prefer to paint happy, to paint light, to paint good.
I get a very uplifting kind of sense when I'm looking at your work. Yeah,
that's my intention, and that nobody else can do. So in the way that I do it, and the more I let that sink in with myself, the more confident I become of not comparing myself to other people.
Right.
Because I did it for years. I did it about galleries. Oh, I'm not in good enough galleries. I need to get in this gallery. I need to get in that gallery. Meanwhile, that gallery will take more from you, and also will not allow you to be in any other galleries within this certain area, and you're like, okay, so you've given yourself up to those, which is fine for some people, but, and I love my galleries that I've dealt with, because I got rid of the ones I didn't like. I kept the ones I liked. I've worked with some people for years and years, and I love, and it's mainly women, not all, but mainly women. And it's a great relationship. But anyway, the comparison thing, that's a whole different, if you start really thinking about it, it's comparing apples and oranges, But I read something thinking about you talking about looking at your work and not liking it, thinking it's not as good as the masters or whatever. Children's art changes at the age of like 9, 10. Generally, that's the age. And the majority of it is from somebody looked at their artwork and said, that's not good, or that doesn't look like that, or that doesn't look like a tree, or that, and their brain is now to the point where that comes in, and they think they have to draw a certain way to make it look like this or that. Before that, they draw and paint just what they want, and without that exterior influence. So you can see the difference. My grandchildren, the majority of them are still under that age. The 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds artwork is incredible. And I have I literally have some of it hanging in my house, because it is so true. It is so real, and
kind of like unfiltered.
It is
completely raw.
Yeah, it is. So anyway, all of that, it's like, wouldn't we like to keep that, that, and I think some people, successful artists have done that. They've been able to just keep that through. It's like a musician, similarly, in writing music, the writing that is true to you is what last through the, the stuff and the confidence of not being compared, or comparing, you can let that go. I'm not being terribly clear about that, but
yeah, well, no, I think you're hitting on something though, the confidence, like I was saying earlier about, okay, the first time I ever taught drums, I didn't have the confidence, but from doing it that one time, and it went, gangbusters, it just went really well. It just gave me this huge boost. So then that little voice in the back of my head saying, oh, you can't do that, you're too young, you're too this, you're too that.
yeah,
All
you're
of a
not
sudden,
serious enough. Yeah.
it's like smashing a spider or something. It's like, okay, I got you now. Just be quiet and let me do my thing.
Yeah.
So I think the confidence builds and builds as we go. And, that little voice that judges us, that kind of self-critic that we all have, it starts to either become very, very quiet or just completely not even there.
Yeah. 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 And every once in a while it rears its ugly head, but at least you recognize it. Yeah. Yeah.
100%. Yeah. 100%.
Yeah.
Like with art, it's like a balancing act. Like in order to get better at anything, you have to be intentional. You have to put your work in. But if you're too focused on getting better, that's when you get into that zone of, I'm not enjoying this anymore because it doesn't look perfect. Like how are you able to ultimately balance getting better with just enjoying the process and being free?
I think the concept of getting better, that definition of that changes. That's how that happens. What is better? Better for me now is very different than it was 20 years ago. Better for me now, the more true to myself I can be in my work, the better it is, I believe, and I see it. I didn't know that. I didn't understand that. I just wasn't in a place where I could. And I thought better was paint like that person, paint like the masters, paint like, somebody else that is successful.
Right. You're sitting there thinking, okay, well, Billy Ray over here, he could charge $10,000 for a portrait, Can I charge that? I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, who is successful that you like, and what can you do like that, that kind of thing, as opposed to just being you and trying to follow your own path, So, but it took me a long time to get to that, as I said before. So,
yeah, it makes me think of a quote from a musician, Miles Davis. He said something to the extent of, the hardest thing to do is to sound like yourself.
Yeah.
So, you put out all these albums and you play with all these different quartets or whatever. And then they're like, okay, give me X, give me Y. And you're like, I don't know, 10 years ago, I could have given you that, but I don't know about now. And it's very, I think art in general is very fluid. It's very moving.
It is.
There's a lot of motion. It's very, very difficult to just grab something. It's kind of like if you've ever tried, when you're a little kid, try to grab a fish in the water, feel like, oh, I could get this fish. And of course you never do.
Yeah. Yeah. That's true. That's true. And it's I mean, it comes and goes, and, you just do what you can, try to just keep at it, Yeah.
Like, how important do you feel others affirming your work is versus just being self-affirming? Like, I like doing this because I like doing it versus I'm doing this because somebody's complimenting me.
Yeah, that's a good question too. I think we can fool ourselves into thinking we don't care what other people think. Everybody cares what other people think.
Yeah.
Let's put it this way. 99% of the people do. There are people that don't, but there are few in our general world, but it's, I try to work on staying in my bubble and really only worrying about me with that. You know, I had so many years where I had to sell, and I still really enjoy, I love creating and I love selling my work. So it's not just the creating part. So I think it's, it's just, I'd say it's a constant trying to kind of balance those things, but everybody cares what other people think. I like people liking my work. I like I like the impact that it makes, but I also just like the fact that people like it, and I have a whole lot of repeat, people collecting multiple pieces, and there's something in it that they see that really connects with them. That makes me really happy, that they feel that way. So, but I still have, sometimes I have the little feeling of like, oh, it's not that good. It's not, anybody can do that kind of a thing. And I think part of that is because certain things come easily to me with it. And so I tend to think, oh, other people could do that. And I had this discussion with my daughter-in-law, who's a gardener, and she has a gardening business. And she is so talented with what she does. And I said to her, she said, you're so good at what you do. And she said, but I feel like anybody could do it. Anybody could, I taught myself this, anybody can do it. I said, that's the same way I feel a lot of times about what I do. But that's because that's the truth of it coming through, that we feel like it was that, that anybody could do it because it was easy. We were not struggling with that. So anyway, yeah.
No, that is a great point about us kind of undervaluing what we do, because in our own mind we perceive that others, it'll be easy for them because it's easy for us, but that's not always necessarily the case.
That's right. That's right. Exactly. Yeah. So, and that also ties into, like I was talking about, the truth of who you are thing, the truth of of putting
That's
yourself.
Huge. That's a huge part, because like you're saying, okay, kids 5, 6, 7, they're still in that mode where they're just purely creating, almost like in a God mode. They're just letting everything flow straight through them onto the pen or paper or whatever it is. And as we get older, people say, oh, it looks nicer when you do trees like this, or, do clouds like Bob Ross does, or, so you get all these different critiques, and then that kind of creates what you're doing. But like you said, your favorite part is kind of taking that step back and getting back into your childhood roots of, this is my pure energy, putting forth my pure energy into these current projects. That's
right.
Kind of what it sounds like to me that you're saying.
Yeah. That's true. That's true, for sure. Yeah. My grandson, who is 8, and he does a lot of art, and he will have to. My oldest granddaughter's the same way. When they need to create something, they need to do it, and they need to do it now. And like, I don't care how long it takes, but if they're in the car, if they're in the bathtub, they have to draw or paint or make whatever it is. It's just, and that drive obviously is an innate like need to create. It's pretty cool to watch.
And I think we all have it. It's just some of us cultivate it and expand upon it, and some of us just totally miss it.
Yeah. Well, some people don't believe they have it, so they don't, so they've covered it, that's, yeah. It's like I tell everybody's an artist. Everybody's a creator. We all are, That's what we're doing. You know, we're creating, this is creating, you know.
This is art. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Amazing conversation. We're at the top of the hour. Before we get out of here, where can we find you at? And did you want to leave our audience with any closing thoughts?
Any closing thoughts? Well, no, but other than thank you for having me, and I've enjoyed the conversation. And you can find me at thank you, mollywrightart.com.
Awesome. Just to spell it out, MOLLY W.
Yeah, MOLLYWRIGHTARTIST.com. Well, actually, that's my email. It's just Molly Wright Art, ART.com.
Okay.
Yeah. And Instagram is Molly Wright Art, Instagram and Facebook. So, yeah.
Yeah, we definitely appreciate you, and we have to have you back sometime.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. It was great. Thank you very much.
Very nice talking to you tonight.
Thanks. Okay. Thank